Here it is, guys. It's week 3 of Beyond Blessed, taken by our very own Mark Pomery. Maybe grab a pen and paper because there's heaps of information there for you.
Hey there, Elevate friends and family. Great to have you with us today. Now, let me just start with a pretty simple question. Have you got anything that concerns you, like ongoing concerns you? Like for me, it's AI. When it comes to AI, I've got questions. Who's driving the bus on this whole AI thing? Are there any guardrails? Did we not learn anything from the Terminator movies? Now, just for the record, some of you already have a robot in your home. It's called a Roomba. Yeah? Anyone have a Roomba? Just a little warning, Terminator, the early years. Yeah, so don't say I didn't warn you. But things can concern us. I was at a conference recently, and one of the speakers there is Reverend Tim Costello, who used to be the head of World Vision here in Australia. And Tim was just sharing about, when his kids were growing up, he started looking at the world, looking at the wars that were started, looking at the political issues that were coming up, looking at all this stuff. And he just found himself growing increasingly concerned. How's this going to play out for my kids? What's their future going to look like? Is it going to be okay? Are they going to be okay? And then he said, I realized one day I've become my parents because his parents had asked all those various questions for themselves some decades prior. But look, the fact of the matter is there's always things that concern us, different things to different extents. One of them, it's kind of universal, well, largely universal, is just a question around meaning and purpose. And when I think about this, one of the quotes that I find myself thinking about, which is a very famous quote, although no one can quite pinpoint its original source, but the quote goes like this: the 2 most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And I would put it to you that second piece, the day you find out why you were born, will actually cause a whole lot of other things to kind of fall into line, to give more meaning, more purpose, and sort of fortifying our lives. And this purpose piece isn't necessarily relegated to becoming the next Thomas Edison, the next Henry Ford, the next Albert Einstein. In fact, I want to just kind of highlight today that finding your purpose and your meaning is actually a lot less complicated than we often make it. So, come along on this journey with us. How about you scan this flow code, get your smartphone camera handy. It's going to take you to Ephesians chapter 1. And this is the chapter, the letter that we've been focusing on in this whole series, Beyond Blessed. And this is a letter that was written by one of the early church leaders, a guy named Paul, and he wrote it to a church in a place called Ephesus. And one of the things when you read this, and it's an incredible letter, and the first chapter is often considered one of the greatest chapters in the entire Bible, is to understand Paul wrote this letter from inside a very, very harsh Roman prison. And when he writes this letter from a harsh Roman prison, he is just going off about all of the great things that God has done, all the blessings he's already provided, the blessings he's currently providing, and the blessings he's going to provide, all from a brutal Roman prison. Now, we've already covered off the blessings that God loves us, God chose us, God adopted us. Next week, we're going to look at the blessing that God has forgiven us if we've become a follower of Jesus. The following week, we're going to look at the reality that God has blessed us by calling us his heirs. Today, I want to talk about the reality that God has blessed us with purpose. And this list, loved, chosen, adopted, given purpose, forgiven, become heirs, nothing and nobody can take these away from you. The government can't take these away. Other people can't take these away. And Paul, writing from a brutal Roman prison, clearly is proof positive that your circumstances can't take these blessings away. So, continuing on with this letter that we've been studying, Paul writes, God has now revealed to us his mysterious will regarding Christ, which is to fulfill his own good plan. And this is the plan. At the right time, he will bring everything together under the authority of Christ, everything in heaven and earth. Right off the top, this is great news. God's got a good plan when it comes to the future, when it comes to the earth, when it comes to everything. God's driving the bus towards that good plan. Paul clicks on the reality of the plan. At the right time, he will bring everything together under the authority of Christ. So here's the big idea today. Because God has a plan, you have a purpose. It's not random. It's not mysterious. It's not hidden. God has a plan, so you and I have a purpose. Now, of course, we don't always see it. We don't always understand it, but this assurance that Paul gives is that God has a good plan and he's moving at the right time to execute this good plan. Now, here's something you already know about life. Life can be hard sometimes. You know, we will encounter hard times. We have in the past. Some of us, some of you may be encountering hard times now. And invariably, we'll all encounter hard times in the future. And one of the pro tips when you're encountering these circumstances, these isolated, these short periods of hard times, one of the things that will help us get through them is the bigger story we tell ourselves. Like, how does this hard time fit into the longer arc, the bigger story? And Tim Keller, who led a church in New York City for many, many years, he kind of metaphorically tells this story that imagine you're standing at a bus stop, minding your own business, and some guy randomly comes up to you and says, the common name for the duck is Histrionicus, Histrionicus, Histrionicus. And that's it. Says no more. And this is all very unexpected. This makes absolutely no sense, or at least very little sense. And actually, the only way that you can take that random, isolated incident and have it make more sense is to try to frame it in the context of a bigger story. So, you might tell yourself, wow, this guy's losing it. I better get out of here. That's the bigger story. That's how you frame this incident. Maybe you tell yourself, this guy's probably a Latin teacher, and he's mistaken me from one of his students, and he was just testing me. Or another story, bigger story is, maybe he's a spy. And when he says Histrionicus 3 times, I'm meant to say the code word back, and then he knows I'm the contact. But just any one of those 3 stories proving to be true will give meaning to this very, very odd, isolated incident. And this idea of a bigger story helps us make sense of all sorts of things, including hard times, including purpose, including confusion. Knowing that God has a plan, because he has a plan, we have a purpose. And Paul said, here's the plan. It's no longer a mystery. That in the right time, God will bring everything under the authority of Christ. And he goes on, it says it's in Christ that we find out who we are. Hello. And what we're living for. Hello. Long before we first heard of Christ and got our hopes up, he had his eye on us, had designs on us for glorious living, part of the overall purpose. So our story is part of the overall purpose he's working out in everything and everyone. Now, there's a phrase that the early church kind of kicked off, and it has transcended centuries. We still use it today, and it's a very simple phrase that goes like this: Jesus is Lord. And you might have heard it, you might have thought it, you might have read it, you might have even said it. Jesus is Lord. This very simple three-word sentence literally recognizes that Jesus has ultimate authority over everything. He's the Lord over the news outlets. He's Lord over YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc. He's Lord over Taylor Swift, Jay-Z, and Snoop Dogg. He's Lord over the political party that you like and the ones that you don't like. He's Lord over Australia, China, Russia, America, and the Middle East. He's Lord over Wall Street, your street, and Sesame Street. He's Lord over the stock market, the financial market, and the supermarket. See, saying Jesus is Lord and recognizing that Jesus is Lord means that there's no area in life, no authority in this world, no arena of power that isn't subject to his power. Which doesn't mean bad things don't happen, because let's face it, we live in a fallen world, and this fallen world is often led and influenced by broken people, but it means that God's ultimately still driving the bus. That's the biggest story. That's the biggest story that gives meaning to hard times and confusion and things that concern us. The big story is God is bringing everything and placing everything under the authority of Jesus Christ. And in fact, Paul even gives us the assurance elsewhere that one day every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. That's the plan, people, and God's working the plan right now, right here. It's working, it's happening, it's in progress. And because God has a plan, we have a purpose. So let's talk about the purpose. Paul goes on in chapter 2, verse 10, to write, we're God's masterpiece. He's created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. You're a masterpiece. You're not an accident, which incidentally, I like to remind people there's no such thing as accidental children, just accidental parents, but that's a topic for another time. You're not a mistake. You're not just some random collection of atoms and molecules. God created you, loved you, chose you, adopted you, placed you in his family, blessed you, and he empowers you. God has planned good things in advance for us to do. So what are some of those good things? Well, look, this is where a lot of people get tripped up. Now, there's some clues that point to the good plans that God has prepared in advance for us to do. Things like spiritual gifts, passions, things we're passionate about, past experiences that we can bring into the present, dreams God's placed in our heart. These are all important clues, but even then, I think we can make it a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. What's my purpose? So I like to just give a very, very simple framework, part of the bigger story. And it looks like this, that God has a general will and a specific will. And when we talk about God's will, God's purpose, we often only think about it in terms of this specific will, and we too often just say, well, that's very elusive. But actually, God's got a general will. God's general will is what he wants all of his children to be doing. It's like a freeway. Like, everyone get on the freeway. Multiple lanes, but get on the freeway and go in this direction. All of us. Love people, forgive people, pray for people, bless people. That's the everyone stuff. That's God's general will, the freeway. Once we're on the freeway, moving in the right direction, then we can start to look at, is there a specific lane? Is there a specific place? Is there a specific pace that I can be on? So I really want to focus on God's general will today to really get us kick-started on the idea of getting on the freeway, going in the right direction, and then letting God lead us from there over time towards, his more specific will. But here's, in a nutshell, his general will. Do good works and be good news. This is for everyone. Do good works and be good news. Now, these things are important to do in the context of a church. Do good works like serve, give, pray, bring your best, worship, all those things. Do good works and be good news in the context. Speak life, encourage people, look for people who are hurting and help them. All of those things inside the church are very, very, very important. And I talked about some of those last week. But God's general will for us, do good works and be good news, isn't meant to be limited to a church context. We're meant to take that everywhere. Do good works and be good news. Now, there's a crime novelist from the first half of the last century named Dorothy Sayers, and she wrote an essay called Why Work? And I just want to read a little slice, just like lean in, pay attention, put Instagram down. And this is in sort of ye olde timey language, just a warning. And she wrote this: in nothing has the church so lost her hold on reality as in her failure to understand and respect the secular vocation. Your job out there in the marketplace. The church's approach to an intelligent carpenter is usually confined to exhorting him not to be drunk and disorderly in his leisure hours, and then to come to church on Sundays. What the church should be telling him is this: that the very first demand that his religion makes upon him is that he should make good tables. No crooked table legs or ill-fitting drawers ever, I dare swear, came out of the carpenter's shop in Nazareth. Whatever it is that you do in your sort of majority of your life, your job, your being a parent, all the things in those settings, do good works and be good news. Even if you're in a job that you don't like, even if you're in a job that you feel stuck, like this isn't my dream job, I don't even like this job, while you're there, you can carry out God's general will. Do good works, be good news, and actually that positions us to better allow him to maneuver us into the lane that he ultimately wants us to live in. Do good works, be good news. Now, I came across this story during the week, and I'm going to finish with this. The church leader spotted a lady at the end of their service, spotted a lady leaving that he hadn't recognized, hadn't seen her before, so he kind of intercepts her and, introduces himself, says, is this your first time here? Yeah, my first time here. Okay, tell us the reason you're here. And she said to him, well, actually, it's because of my boss. And he's like, wait, what? Pressed her a little. And she said, well, at my job, I made a pretty big mistake. And my boss went to his bosses and actually took responsibility for my mistake, prevented me from effectively getting fired, and gave me a second chance. And so I said to my boss, like, you're like no bosses I've ever worked for. In fact, in my work history, my bosses would take credit for the good things that I've done and would then give me the blame for the mistakes that I made. So what is it that makes you different? And she pressed him a little. Eventually he opened up and he said, well, look, I'm a follower of Jesus, and Jesus' love has taught me about sacrifice, that I'm meant to work for the greater good of others, and he's taught me about second chances. And so, that's my guiding principle. And the woman said, so I asked him, what church do you go to? And he told her, and so she rolled up at that particular church because she was driven by this idea that I want to get in on whatever it is that's going on in my boss's life, because it's different and it's good. And that boss was an example of somebody that was walking in God's purpose for his life. Do good works and be good news and expect that it's going to transform and impact other people in your sphere.